Kabam! It is week 14. 14, let's count it. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Dude, we have, and ladies and gentlemen, we have 5 weeks left of this class, of this semester. So, and we have some fun stuff. I mean, last night's learn together where you took the basic idea of the calculator, that base code, and you improved it. It was fun to see just the different ways that you did that, and I hope that gives you enough like understanding of the program to then do this week's, because this week's week 14 is I want you to do a mock-up. Right? So a mock-up is just basically how you think your code's going to look. And again, this is me trying to encourage you to start doing your dev too. Okay? Or at least start thinking about how you're going to implement it. And so, in that vein of trying to encourage you, now that I have been through both the week before Dev 1 was due and now the week after, and I've done almost all the code reviews, and I really enjoy code reviews. I learn honestly so much from you all, and I learn and I try to apply these ideas of like, how can I make this better? And one of the things I realized that I showed you and I anticipated you would walk away with understanding. Not everyone did. And so that's one of the things. And I just want to talk about this for a minute. So the reason why I did a whole, I posted on our attendance, I think at least a couple weeks ago, was my detailed step by step for how my rock scissors paper worked. Now, last week I just kind of briefly looked at my EV stuff and just kind of gave you an overview of how I did the JSON file. But one of the reasons I showed that was to give you an idea of like a level of implementation and level of depth. And not that you had to have that same, but at least give you an example. But probably the thing I guess I should have been more explicit on was like, I am, and I probably said this to a couple of people, I am your target market for this particular code, right? First thing I'm going to do when you turn in code is I'm going to pull your code from GitHub and I'm going to run it on my local system. Well, that's why I wanted you to understand, at least in my local system, what works better for at least file handling. Okay. So I'm just going to tell you that's going to happen again. I didn't end up taking off any points off of anyone because I allowed you, the person who was demoing the code, to show me it worked on yours. But think about it. It's not a good representation of reality that your code is only going to run on your system. You want to make code, right? You want to write code. You want to have code that can handle at least the major operating systems that we all live with today. And the nice thing is, because Windows uses a Mac, or Mac uses a Linux-like subsystem, right? You can kind of group those into two. So as long as it works on Windows and it works on Linux, you're fine. Okay, not completely fine, but at least much closer than hard coding a C drive into your opening of your file. And the other thing is, and I understand that when Al gave most of his examples, he created a subdirectory off of the root. That's probably not going to happen ever, right? And so the thing I would tell you is just, and it won't take a lot of work, but the file, and I've seen most students who didn't even have to think about this, just opened a file and that's in their same directory that their dev code was in. And that's generally the best way to do it, although you can create, and a couple of you did, subdirectories off of that directory. Let me just show you again, because I used this same technique in my EV code, was the idea of using this like OS path. And by the way, and I'll just say this, like Isaac Lowe did a great job here, even taking this to a whole other level too, using path as well. But in this case, the reason I like this code, right, is that, and let me just, run it just to show you, because if I stop my debugging right there, right, when it runs this line, right, so here I am, and as soon as I step into this line, so now if I look at the directory, what it's going to do is it's going to get that location, because it looks at the file that I'm running, and it pulls out the absolute path. It splits it so that I can have the file name and the dir name, directory name, but I really only need the dir name. So I just think that's a good way to do it. And so I just referenced when I said open my JSON file, and this could be true for any file, right? I just open the dir name plus the actual name. Now that's where if I wanted a subdirectory, I would have done it there. Meaning a subdirectory, let me just be clear, inside of the directory dev1 that you were running. So I'm just going to tell you that if you ran into that issue, make sure on your last dev2 you fix that, and you're welcome to use this particular one, or maybe Isaac, or actually the other really good example was Motsen. Motsen did a really nice job as well, and actually many of you did. So the other thing I would say is, if you want to, it's perfectly fine to push your code out to the public and let everybody get, know that you've put it there in case they want to look at it. It's always good. Like I think reading somebody else's code is so helpful. It's like I think of the analogy of English, right? So in English, the more you read, the better your writing is going to be. And this is so true in coding as well. Okay. Having said all that, let me just show you what I did today. Is I went ahead and drafted, because in week 14, I ended up because the video for week 14 Learn Together is from last semester, and I ended up at the beginning of that video talking about dev2, but I've changed it, and actually in that video you'll see when you hit play it should start later in the video, because one thing, I can do that with an embed from YouTube. I can tell it where to start in there, but I just want you to know that I am adding some requirements that I didn't have last semester based on some of the experience I saw here. And so here's the requirements I have them today is like, take your output from dev1 and just build a graphical user interface in this software that we're learning. Now, make sure, and this is the thing I just covered, right? So make sure you have cross-platform file handling and reference code, right? AKA make sure it works on mine, and I've told you what works on mine, so it should be pretty easy. If you choose another topic, which you totally can do, right? And the thing, and who was it? Tim, I think Tim and I were talking about this. Like, the idea is that my requirements are minimum requirements, and what you want to do is really push your skill as far as you can. It should be like, absolutely nail the requirements for mine, but then try some things if you're really trying to, which I think most of us are in a class like this, trying to extend our skill base, right? Right. And then the other thing is, and that's what I was saying, if you choose a different topic, you still are like, these devs are, and I don't know if I've said this is clear, so I'm trying to be more clear, right? You need to, if you're doing a different topic, make sure you meet Dev 0 and Dev 1 requirements. You still, if you're going to write a new code, you have to have that code conform to those requirements, because they're stacked, right? So in Dev 1, you really needed to make sure you had all of Dev 0 implemented. And if you missed something, you should have fixed it. As a matter of fact, that's what I would say right now. Fix any issues that you and I talked about in your code. And this last two, first one, and I've already talked about this, so I'm just putting it in writing, right? Implement a class, OOP. Implementing it is not required, but it's a good way to level up your skill. So it's kind of like, see if you can do it without class, right? Again, we have one more week. Actually, no, we have 2 weeks. Sorry, we have 2 weeks left of Katinker, and then we'll change to the OOP. And I've said before, and I will make sure I modify week 15 to include the guy who's doing our instruction or lectures for the graphical user interface, how to actually implement a class in there, right? But and then make sure, and I've said this last week, so I'm just putting it in writing, and I will actually have the schedule out probably in the next couple of weeks, but make sure you understand the timeline at the end of the semester and how you need to do a code review before the due date this time. Can't do them after. Okay, so I just wanted to say that, and I am definitely changing this course content as far as, because anyway, you don't need to hear about that. Just know it is changing, right? There is definitely some stuff happening because I'm working. Look at me talking about it after I said I wouldn't, but I think I've said this to some of you. I'm working with the data science folks who are doing a new program at City, and so I'll be teaching Python and machine learning this time next year in that program. So I'm making changes to my Python course already. One of the things, and this was a suggestion from Andrew in this class, is probably using Jupyter notebooks to write and run Python code, but ultimately still moving into the local development environment because VS Code handles that. If you don't know anything I'm talking about there, don't worry. But it's good to learn, right? So anyway, have a great weekend. I'm excited. It is still beautiful. It's not too hot. It's a good time to get some vitamin D, everyone. Make sure your if you don't, I'll end with a PSA. If you don't get your vitamin D level checked, you probably want to think about it. It is a really important vitamin that if you're not going outside with your skin exposed, you're probably not getting. And even supplements, although they're better than nothing, the best way to get it is actually just to get some sun. You don't have to get too much. Once your skin gets a little bit red, you've had enough, okay? But get some. It's a really important thing to do. Anyway, have a good weekend. I'll talk to you later. PSA is over. Peace out.